Chris Mannix, the senior NBA writer for Sports Illustrated, joining us now. All right, Mannix, sources close to me tell me that you said the third best player in the NBA was LeBron James.
No, well, look, let's clarify this. Paulie emailed me just before the show and asked me who the third best player was. In my foggy state of not waking up yet, I wasn't clear on what you were talking about. If you're talking about the MVP this year, Kevin Durant's number one on my ballot, Paul George is number two, and LeBron James is number three.
Who is the third best player in the NBA?
The third best player in the NBA is Chris Paul.
Who's the second?
It's Kevin Durant, and LeBron's the best.
Okay.
Look, LeBron is the best player. I don't know if it's by far, but it's by a significant amount. Now, he's not having the best season so far this year. Kevin Durant, I think, by a good amount is having the best season, and I think Paul George is having the second best season this year because you have to factor in team success. And yes, LeBron has put Miami on its back for most of the time, but they're still a good distance behind Indiana for first place in the Eastern Conference, and they're playing in that woebegone Eastern Conference where even without Dwayne Wade, they shouldn't be losing to some of these bad teams. So Durant and Paul George have had better seasons so far, but LeBron is, I think, by a good amount, the best player.
If everyone was healthy, Rondo, Derrick Rose, Russell Westbrook, who's the third best player in the NBA?
I'd still take Chris Paul because I think he's the best point guard in the NBA. And, Dan, over the last, 15 years or so, the point guard position has become the most valuable position in the NBA. It's what the center was during the 80s and the 90s and the days of yesterday.
Yeah, but you're not winning championships.
You can.
Who?
I'm sure, top of my head. Well, look, some of it has been exceptional circumstances. When you have three Hall of Famers on a team, you can win without a great point guard. When you have Shaq and Kobe, you can win without a great point guard. But San Antonio has a great point guard. Tony Parker, in a lot of people's minds, myself included, is fifth on this year's MVP ballot. So it's, the teams that get deep into the playoffs generally have great point guards. And if you ask any coach in the Western Conference what the most critical position is, they'll say point guard because it is a murderer's row of point guards in the West playoffs.
But everybody has one.
Because you have to win with one.
Well, they almost cancel each other out.
I don't know if they cancel each other out. If you play a team that doesn't have a great one, you're not going to be as successful. Portland's success this year, there's been a lot of factors, obviously, but Damian Lillard being the player that he is a huge factor in that success. I think every team in the league has to have a great point guard, unless you have, the Bosh, Wade, LeBron troika that can carry you without one.
Is Kevin Love top five?
I don't put him at the top five right now because maybe I'm different, but I think you have to elevate your team to a higher level in order to be considered in that top five list. My MVP ballot always, and my list of best players, always includes guys that elevate their team. That's why I give Paul George a ton of credit. That's why I give LaMarcus Aldridge a ton of credit. He's number 4 on my MVP ballot so far. Now, I'm not sure where he ranks in terms of best players right now, but Aldridge this year, now that he's playing his natural power forward position, he's absolutely an MVP in my mind.
Steph Curry, top five?
No, because, first of all, I don't think he defends as well as some of these other players do. Chris Paul is a very good defender on that side of the ball, in addition to being the offensive mastermind in terms of playmaking. I think Steph Curry is the best shooter in the NBA. He's a top 5 point guard in the NBA, but he's not a top 5 player in the NBA.
Anything else we need to keep an eye on here? Kobe getting voted in for the AllStar Game. Do we keep it in the hands of the fans? Is everybody okay with all of this?
You keep it in the hands of the fans because it's inclusive. I'd like to see Kobe bow out and give somebody else a chance. I mean, even when he was playing this year, he wasn't playing at an all-star level, but that almost never happens. I think Kobe said something last night to the effect of, "I might give up my starting spot to one of the younger players, but I think he's still going to be on the team." I don't like some of the way this fan balloting goes. And by the way, Dan, this year especially, I hate the whole front court thing. I hate the fact that Dwight Howard and Roy Hibbert are not starting in this All-Star game. The center is still a position in the NBA. It still is an actual position in today's NBA. Dwight has been the best center in the Western Conference. Roy Hibbert, by far and away, has been the best center in the Eastern Conference. No disrespect to guys like Kevin Love and whatnot, or Carmelo for that matter, but those guys deserve to be the starting center.
Is Dwight Howard? He's not top 5. Is he top 10 players in the league?
Yeah, he's top 10 because I think you have to have a center in that mix. And Dwight, despite all the criticism that he gets, is still a game-changing ball-changing defensive player and a dominant offensive player on that end of the floor. I mean, he still can't make free throws, obviously, but he still is top 10.
Is he the best player on his own team?
No. James Harden's a better player.
I can't put him in the top 10 then.
Well, James Harden, remember last year, Dan, he was number 8 on the MVP ballot. He had a great year last year, and he's having, he struggled in December. I think his three-point shot was way off, but overall, he's had a great year. I think they're two top 10, top 15 type players.
But if you have, does any other team have that? I know Westbrook's hurt, or he'd be a top 10 player.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, I think they might be, top 6, 7 type players. I think Russell is that high.
But doesn't that put more pressure on Houston to say, you guys should be great, that they should be at the top of the Western Conference? We should be talking, playing. I know they don't play a lot of defense, except for Howard, but, they should be great, right?
They should be a lot better, Dan, but take a look at the teams that are so successful this year. The one common thread that all of them have is continuity. You look at Oklahoma City, Indiana, San Antonio. These guys are great and have been playing together for 3, 4, 5 years, if not longer in the case of San Antonio. I think James Harden and Dwight Howard will get on the same page. I think they'll become a great tandem over the years, but you can't do that without developing continuity. That's what, I spent a lot of time this year talking to Brad Stevens in Boston, and one of the things he talks about a lot is, developing that kind of continuity, keeping the same starting lineup, keeping the same rotation tightened together. That's how teams get better. Good teams get better, and good teams become great, just keeping that same continuity. So when Dwight and James get, a year, 2 years under their belt, I think they'll be those type of players.
Okay, Rondo, if he's healthy, is he better than Chris Paul?
It's a great question. At times, he can be. Overall, no. If I had to pick one player, I would take Chris Paul. At times, Rondo can be.
Is he a top 5?
A top 5 player?
Yeah, Rondo.
At times, he can be.
Well, then he's not a top 5 player.
Then he's not a top 5 player. There was a stretch when he was last year. He was healthy, Dan. When KG and Pierce were on that team and they were still having success, where he was a top 5 player in the league. He's just. Eric Spoelstra, I thought, said it best, calling him a basketball maestro. He's out there and he's creating offense for teammates in ways no player in the league can do it. He is tremendously effective. But on a consistent basis, night in, night out, on both sides of the ball, I have to give it to Chris Paul.
But can you? I don't know if he's going to stay in Boston. It feels like somebody's going to come in and say, like Dallas, and say, you know what, I want Rondo. Is that going to happen?
Well, what are you going to give up for him, though, Dan?
I don't know.
Every time somebody says to me a team is going to go get Rajon Rondo, you better tell me what you're going to get for him in return, because this guy is a cornerstone franchise
player. But
player.
they nearly traded him a couple of years ago.
That was in a deal for Chris Paul.
Okay.
If you want to give me Chris Paul back, I'll take him.
Why are you yelling at me?
I'm not. Rondo is somebody that gets me a little fired up because I don't think I honestly don't think, Dan, that people appreciate him as much as they should, because no, he can't shoot the ball. Yes, he gambles defensively. Sometimes he's selfish with his assists, if that makes any sense. But he is still an elite player at that position, and I still believe that position is the most valuable.
Celtic ball boy coming in to play here.
People in Boston are against Rondo. A lot of people in Boston want to see him trade. I don't understand. I think they should be building around this guy, not trading him for assets. He's 28 years old, Dan. He's just entering the prime of his career. You can build around him and trade guys like Kelly Olynyk or some of the 7 first-round draft picks they have in the next 3 years to build around Rondo, and use one of the high picks they get this year to get a Jabari Parker or a Joel Embiid or an Andrew Wiggins.
Go back to bed.
Can I tell you one more thing, Dan?
Yes.
I'm starting to jump off the Ricky Rubio bandwagon.
Oh, now you realize the guy can't shoot.
The shooting is a problem for me.
I told you that.
Well, I'm not saying at this moment that he can't learn to shoot.
But
I still think guys can do that.
But Chris, I'm a shooter. I know shooters. Rubio's no shooter.
But don't you think he can develop into one?
No.
I don't know. I still think he can.
It's like Rondo can't develop into being a shooter. He's a scorer.
I don't think Rondo has put the requisite effort into developing.
He worked with Mark Price, one of the great shooters of all time.
But there are lots of guys that come into the league that can't shoot. That's the biggest skill guys learn when they come into the NBA. Michael Redd, I've used this example before, came into the NBA as a non-shooter. George Karl told him, you can't be a regular rotation player until you become a shooter. He developed into one of the best shooters at the game. Not everybody's Ray Allen, Dan.
He had form. I need to see if you have form, you have touch. If you start with that, you got a chance. If you don't have that, Rubio doesn't have good form. Even Rondo, they don't have good form. You must have that.
Well, change your form.
Who's calling? Is that Rubio calling you?
It might be.
All right, I'll go back to Ben.
All right, Dan.
All right, that's Chris Mannix. Jumped off the Ricky Rubio bandwagon. Wow.